Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming to the last day of we're going to take a break as always.
Telling you what our fall lineup is looking like so far. In September, and this will be up at the Hillsborough Library, which is where we have traditionally done our fall series. On Sunday afternoons, 2:00, and one a month. We will start in September with Julie and Julie Herbert and Linda Bell doing a presentation on native plants. Perfect timing because, as you know, fall is the time to plant, and in October, the second Saturday, put it on your calendars, October 11th, I believe it is. Is that right, March?
Yes, ma'am.
We will be having Plant Fest, and this year it is going to be bigger and better than ever. The Master Gardeners of Orange County are really stepping up the game. It's going to be at Blackwood Farm Park. There will be, did I hear 50 tables? Plus, we're going to have close to 2,000 plants for sale. There will be music. There will be food trucks. It's a day.
It's a festival.
It's a festival, Plant Fest. It's going to be a lot of fun. There will be things for kids. It's a bring the family, spend the day. So that will be fun. That's October 11th. And then we've got a couple more Dig Deepers coming up right after that. In October, we have two specialists coming to speak. They are not master gardeners, but this is of interest to everyone who gardens and spends time in the outdoors. Tick-borne diseases. Half of the master gardeners I have spoken with have alpha-gal. That is the least onerous and dangerous disease that I know of from tick-borne, from tick bites. There are some really serious things out there. And so these specialists are going to come and talk to us about tick-borne diseases, how to avoid them. And then in November, our Dig Deeper, we're having a deer biologist from North Carolina Wildlife Federation come and speak about, Kathy's going to give me the eye. The overpopulation, the issues that we have with humans and deer coming together.
It's all perspective.
And also the deer wasting disease that, as you know, is creeping up the state. So anyway, a deer biologist. And then December, we're still working, aren't we, Mart?
We are.
So anyway, welcome to Dig Deeper. I am Robin Bedingfield. I am now coordinating this program along with Ann Snodgrass. And we are so pleased to bring you today's Humane Gardening presentation. Kathy Williams has been a master gardener since 2020, but she has been a veterinarian for 4 decades and specializing in wildlife, animal welfare, and wildlife care, as well as small animals. So I found this talk fascinating, and it will make you think about the interaction of humans and your gardens and wildlife in a new way, I promise. So Kathy?
Thank you. Thank you for that
The floor is
introduction,
yours.
Ben. It was very kind. I do appreciate it. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here to talk to all of you today. And glad you came out on a Monday morning. So I want to talk about humane gardening. It is a topic that is, I would say, less known than some of the other, gardening topics like native plants and organic gardening, but I feel very strongly about this, which is why I'm here, hoping I will kind of give you a little more to think about in your gardens and how you interact with the biodiversity in your yards. Also, ways to enhance that biodiversity.
You can use the microphone
Is there a microphone?
behind you. Yeah, and I think it's recording, so.
So I'm supposed to use a microphone. Okay, can you hear me? All right. Thank you for being here and thank you for that tip. I appreciate it. Okay, so in the, well, for most of human existence, gardening has and gardens have existed for two primary reasons. One is to produce food or sustenance for human beings, vegetable gardens, food gardening, and or to be beautiful and pleasing to our eye. All right, and that's really important. No reason to not want those things, but they also, there's ways now, you understand, I mean, many of you have heard that and know that we are in a rapidly changing time right now with regards to our planet, with regards to biodiversity loss, with regards to how we treat the landscape. And so it's really important to kind of think of our gardens in ways that help support biodiversity and the ecosystem, as well as just not providing immediate benefit to ourselves from a human-centric view, okay? So I put this quote up here simply because to me it's really meaningful. I hope it becomes meaningful to you, or if you have seen it in the past. We will conserve only what we love. We will love only what we understand, and we will only understand what we are taught. And with so many people now being on electronic equipment, on their phones, on computers, people are spending less time outside and have less interaction with nature than previous generations did. And so it's a particularly important time to, educate people and to help people understand the importance of nature and biodiversity and what it means for our own long-term existence, as well as just our short-term pleasure. Okay, so a brief introduction about me. Robin did talk about this already. I'll go over it very, very shortly. I've been an Orange County Master Gardener for about 5 years now. It's been a fantastic experience. Love the people. It's great opportunity. I've been a veterinarian for over 40 years. Yes, I am that old. And most of my career has been specializing in wildlife, mostly under human care, or what is called captive settings, although I've also done research in Madagascar on wildlife in Madagascar and factors that affect populations there. And I also work with small animals, and now I'm working with the Animal Protection Society in Durham, doing spays and neuters and that sort of thing, helping the pet population problems. I also have professional training under the umbrella of veterinary medicine in animal welfare. That is a specialty college with specific training in animal welfare. I'm board certified in that. And I've had a lifelong interest in sustainability and environmental education, and taught environmental ed to grade schoolers back in my early college career. So when I learned about humane gardening, I thought, whoa, this is fantastic. This is my passion of gardening, my passion with the environment, my passion of animal well-being. Yay, kind of fused everything. So really excited to talk to you about this. Okay, what we're going to cover today. We're going to do a brief overview of ecosystems and biodiversity. Many of you know that already, but we want to get everyone on the same page. So a brief review of that. Similarities and differences of environmental versus humane gardening. Just show of hands if you know what environmental gardening is, or never heard the term. Okay, that's all fine too, because we're going to give a brief overview of that, kind of get everyone on the same page, briefly of what environmental gardening is and its premises, and similarities to humane gardening and some differences. So what are the premises and goals of humane gardening? We're going to talk about that. And we'll also include some of the hidden hazards and danger zones in your yard that you may not well be aware or even there or don't even think about, that are harmful to wildlife. Okay, and then we'll give you some practical and easy ways to attract and protect wildlife in your yard. Okay, so selective compassion. As humans, I think this is this is something that we all practice. I am guilty as everyone else about this, but we see animals as animals that we like, animals that we don't like, animals that we want to attract, animals that we consider pests or nuisances. And that can vary. An animal can be both at different times of their life. So the picture of the bee, that's not a native bee, but we tend to really value pollinators as gardeners. We think they are good for the environment, and yes, they are. That's fantastic. So in some insects we like. There are some animals we try to attract birds because they're beautiful. We love their songs. You know, who doesn't love I mean, what's not to love about a box turtle? You know, they're not going to harm anyone. They're just cute. And some of these animals on the lower tier here may be adorable when they're young. They may be considered nuisances when pests when they're older, depending on what they're doing and where they are and what if they're eating something in our yard. So, you know, we sometimes have compassion for animals, sometimes we don't, depending on a variety of factors. So sometimes they're not cute. The bunny that was adorable as a baby is now eating your lettuce. It's not so cute anymore. Okay. Squirrels in your bird feeders are a pest, and yet squirrels have to eat like everybody else. They are extremely adaptable, extremely agile, extremely smart, extremely caring of their young, just like we are, okay? Deer eating your hostas, not so welcome in your yard, and you're getting the gist. Come on, forward, forward. You can do this, really. No, I can't. Yes, I can. Okay. And then there are some animals that we never want in our landscape for a variety of reasons. If you are, you know, really don't like snakes, it doesn't matter if there may not be a good snake or a bad snake in your view. It just all snakes may be bad. Skunks are cute until you get the wrong end of them, and then they're really, you know, really not so much if they're scared. Possums, I think, happen to be adorable, but a lot of people think they're ugly. No fault of the possum, just a lot of people think they're ugly. Coyotes, a lot of people don't want coyotes on the landscape at all, simply because they view them as predators. They're afraid they're going to eat their daughter's pony in the corral. No, they're not, by the way. You know, or that they're going to eat their cat. Yeah, well, they might do that. So keep your cat indoors. But anyway, so, you know, but they are really important. All these animals are really important ecologically to the landscape, and they have a very important role to play. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. I want to mention beavers for a reason, and that is because there have been a number of studies that have looked at ecosystem diversity in areas where before a beaver has been in the landscape and after a beaver has come into the landscape. And the biological diversity and the amount of biodiversity increases actually exponentially when beavers come into an area. Yes, they are landscape engineers. Yes, they block water, and that is great. And the reason that's great is because now they've created aquatic ecosystems. And aquatic ecosystems support so much life, whether it's aquatic ecosystems, insects, amphibians, snakes, all up the food chain. You know, the mammals that go there, that prey on those animals that need that water. Incredible for biodiversity. So, you know, if you got one in your yard, you can celebrate. Don't kill it, celebrate it. You're seeing a message here. I think you're kind of getting the theme here already, picking up the gist. Okay, so it really all comes down to our perspective at any given time and what we're seeing and how we're viewing that. And we're viewing it from a very human-centric view. I'm going to help you try and shift to an eco-centric view. Okay, that's my goal today. Many of you have seen this before, looking at the food chain. You know, everything really starts, and I don't have a pointer sadly, but everything starts with the sun right here. And providing the energy for photosynthesis, along with some nutrients that are in the soil that provide everything that's green, all these little mini solar panels that are leaves and grasses are mini solar panels. And that then is consumed by the primary consumer. These are herbivores. Mostly they are insects. I wish there was a moth up there. I'm going to tell you why in a minute. But they're insects and caterpillars that are eating those. And then there's also herbivores like deer, okay, larger animals that are in this category. Something then eats the insects. And so you have your middle tier consumers, and then you've got your top tier or last tier, and those are the predators. And they're eating mostly protein, mostly meat. So they're the ones that are, you know, they're the hawks, they're the owls, the cougars. Don't have many of those around here anymore. But they are also the foxes and coyotes, okay? When everything dies, everything eventually dies, then all those nutrients that were in that body Fungi take care of those, break them down to elemental nutrients and minerals, and the cycle continues. Okay, so very important on how that works. That is why we are here today, because we are part of the food cycle. All right. This is confusing. I'm not going to go into in detail. The only thing I want to do here really is look at this bottom tier. That bottom tier is a very large, important tier, and it consists of insects. And without insects on this planet, there are no top tiers. Okay, so there used to be lots of insects in our world, and over 75% of those are gone now, having serious impact on the rest of the food chain and ecosystems. And so I just wanted to point out how important that tier is. And when you think of insects, just a little note that many of you know, but birds, 98% of birds feed their young exclusively on soft-bodied insects. Exclusively soft-bodied insects. That's caterpillars. Okay. And the biggest producer of caterpillars in our ecosystem is moths, not the butterflies, not the daytime insects we see. They are the nighttime ones. They are the moths. Okay. Also, their populations have plummeted dramatically. So turn off your outdoor lights. Just please turn off your outdoor lights. We're going to talk a little bit more about outdoor lights, but moths are critically important, as are the caterpillars that they produce. Okay, so why is humane gardening important? Well, as you know, we are in a human-derived environmental crisis, and habitat loss and climate change are accelerating, and ecosystems around the globe are collapsing. Okay, since 1970, we've lost 69%. Actually, that was an older data, so it's more than that, of biodiversity globally, and we, as humans, need that biodiversity for our own survival, for our own food production. Over 75% of insect populations are gone. And we all know we've got one planet Earth. We don't have a spare. Mars is not particularly attractive, and it doesn't have greenery, and it wouldn't be any fun anyway. Agriculture already takes up half of the land on Earth. All right, so it is really critical that 83, well, I'm just going to go back, 83% of the land on the U.S. is privately owned. So yes, there are protected parks. Those are really important. We need those. But if we're really going to have an impact on biodiversity on this planet, and in the United States in particular, the individual homeowner is going to play a really critical role in that. So, so I'm glad you're all here. Okay, an introduction to ecological gardening for those of you who may not have heard that term before. It is a gardening approach, I guess is the best way, mindset. The main goal is to create balanced mini ecosystems that benefit plants, animals, soil, and the planet. And so you're looking at yards, you're looking at individual parks, maybe your local, local ecosystem. So it's trying to kind of take all those small privately owned areas and make them, help them increase the ecosystem diversity and health. Okay, it does that by working with natural processes through soil health, improving water cycles, increasing biodiversity, minimizing human impact on the environment, which is really a challenge for so many reasons, using native plants, composting and organic methods, avoiding the use of synthetic chemicals, and promoting pollinators. I'm going to not say pollinators, I'm going to say insects, because it's not just pollinators that are really, really important. Emphasizing closed loop systems so that waste is recycled back into the system. Okay, those are all great. They're fantastic. A lot to be said for ecological gardening. And what about humane gardening, and how is it similar and how is it different? All right, so for humane gardening, we want to look at creating a compassionate space where humans and wildlife can coexist peacefully. It's all about sharing the landscape. It's not just about humans. It takes a real broad view of the value of all life on this planet, prioritizes the well-being of all animals, focuses on using non-lethal methods to manage conflicts with animals or any other, not just animals, but insects and other organisms, to provide food, water, and shelter for animals, even those that we consider nuisances. Because again, that nuisance mindset is very human-centric. We want to create an ecocentric mindset here. Okay, it avoids harm, no trapping, poisoning, or inhumane practices, and it considers ethical treatment alongside ecological balance and human needs. Okay, so humans are still important. We're part of the ecosystem, but it's not all about us. Both approaches are different sides of the same coin. Both reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Both emphasize native plants to support insects, birds, and wildlife. Encourages composting and natural processes. Discourages the use of synthetic chemicals and aims to enhance biodiversity. So a lot of similarities there. Okay, now we're going to focus on some of the specific factors in humane gardening, all right, and give you a little bit more in-depth understanding of that. Okay, so prioritizing the well-being of animals. And I put this up here because all of these 4 animals that I pulled out here are often thought of as either nuisances or undesirable in the landscape or pests in one way or another. All right, deer. We've talked about deer. They're overpopulation of deer. If you ask deer, they'd say, yeah, these humans, man, they're way out of control. Way too many of those on the landscape. So, it's about perspective, right? We've moved into their landscape. We've built the subdivisions. We're pushing them out. And then we're pissed off that they're coming and eating our hostas. Well, they're trying to survive just like we are. Okay, so what is the value of deer to the ecosystem? They are ecosystem engineers. The reason I say that is because they are herbivores, they are selective grazers, and as if I can do this, when they eat individual plants, they are preventing overgrowth of particular plants and monocultures. Okay, so they keep the plant diversity in check and more in control, so that when it's ideally balanced, so that there's not an overgrowth of one plant or another. The other thing, when they eat seeds, when they eat grasses and these plants, they also eat a lot of seeds. Those frequently come out the other end, and then they distribute those around the landscape in their dung. And so they distribute seeds from a lot of other variety, the plants that they've eaten, essentially. They are a middle link in the food chain. So even though they are herbivores, they transfer plant material into protein, which is really critical for the food chain higher up, okay? Because there's a lot of organisms that need the protein and can't eat the plants. So that's, deer, whether, I guess in this area, it used to be more bobcats, wolves, and cougars. We've gotten rid of the majority of those now. And so, yes, the deer population are not in check naturally anymore. All right, so we've gotten rid of, we have unbalanced the ecosystem in that sense. So yes, they are, they have less pressure from the predator side of things. And historically, they were very important for indigenous populations for food, clothing, and tools. Historically played a very important role. Squirrels, which are adorable. If you really get to know squirrels, really get to go watch some funny squirrel videos. They're fantastic. They'll make you love them. Really, really smart, very adaptable. Squirrels are planters of trees. They think they're storing food for the winter by putting nuts in the ground, and acorns in the ground. And like many of us whose memories are not perfect, they don't always remember where all of them are. And so many of those turn into trees, germinate and turn into trees, okay? In the process of burying those acorns and nuts, they are aerating the soil. We know the importance of that as gardeners. They too are a middle link in the food chain, primarily for, well, I was going to say the smaller predators like foxes, but also coyotes subsist predominantly in this area on squirrels and rodents. That's mostly what they're subsisting on. They can't take a large deer. They're just not big enough to do that. They can take a fawn, but not a large deer. So they are that middle link in the food chain, and they regulate plant populations as well because they eat a lot of seeds, that might otherwise overgrow and cause monocultures, right? So they have their benefits. Raccoons, extremely smart animals. Oh my gosh, these animals are adaptable and smart. They are seed dispersers, very important seed dispersers, because they eat a lot of berries and seeds and fruits. They also eat, and then those come out the other end. And so again, you've got this whole seed dispersal benefit. They are great pest controls and exterminators. Raccoons are omnivorous. What that means is they eat pretty much anything that comes their way. And they predominantly will eat insects and small rodents and small snakes. Okay, so a lot of insect control happening on the raccoon level of those slugs and insects and things like that. They're a cleanup crew. They're also scavengers. So if there's carrion, if an animal has died and is decomposing, they think that's just peachy. So they will eat that and clean up so that that does not turn and rot and cause, disease-causing bacteria and contaminate the environment. They also eat snakes. If you don't like snakes, you got to love raccoons, okay, because raccoons eat snakes. I'm going to tell you why you want to love snakes, though, next. That's coming up. Snakes are fantastic. I know a lot of people don't like them. They're weird. They don't have legs. They can't help that. But they are also great pest control and exterminators, predominantly because they eat small rodents. So those mice you don't want in your house, those voles you don't want in your garden, snakes are going to help you with that. They are prey for other animals. Hawks and owls eat a lot of snakes. Snakes eat a lot of snakes. I didn't know that until recently. Snakes eat snakes. And black snakes eat copperheads, among other snakes. So they really do help keep that balance. If copperheads, in a word, just a word for copperheads, is they are very reclusive snakes. You may not like them, but they don't want to be around you and you don't want to be around them. So just give them space and they'll be fine. Snakes, this is something else I learned. Snakes are very important indicator species for ecosystem health, the health of an ecosystem. And the reason that is because snakes have a fairly small home range. They don't travel from their home range. They tend to stay in their home range. And they have fairly long lives compared to a lot of other organisms. And they eat prey. So they eat smaller animals like rats and mice and insects and things like that. And if those smaller animals have been exposed to pesticides or contamination or a various number of chemicals, those pesticides then accumulate in the snake. Okay, so researchers will catch a snake, they'll evaluate its liver, they'll take a sample of its liver and test it for pesticides, and those pesticides that its prey has eaten has accumulated to higher levels in the snake. So a very important indicator species. Also, when ecosystem health is not good, snakes tend to start disappearing because their prey is disappearing. So really important from that perspective. Okay, I'm going to shift a little bit to looking at what animals perceive. And this is from a veterinary point of view, but it's also, veterinary medicine is science. So what do we know about what animals perceive? Okay, so if you are a human being, and we all are, and somebody steps on your toe, there's a signal in a nerve here in your foot, and it travels up your leg, and it goes up here, and it hits your spinal cord, and then it it connects with other nerves, and that goes up your spinal cord and goes up your neck, goes to your brain. And in your brain, there's a lot of neurochemicals that receive that signal and interpret that signal and tell you, oh my God, that hurts, move your foot, or put a Band-Aid on, or whatever it is. Okay, so that's how that works in humans. In animals, somebody steps on a dog, you step on your dog's foot, the nerve sends it up here through the limb, it comes up to the spinal cord, it meets other nerves and transfers that signal across nerves, it goes up the rest of the spinal cord, up to the neck, up to the nerve, where a bunch of neurochemicals evaluate that impulse and say, oh my God, somebody kicked my foot. Okay, you seeing some similarities here? It's the same thing. They perceive pain exactly the same way we perceive pain. And there's been a lot of science that has looked at, a lot of studies that have looked at pain tracks and pain perception in all vertebrates. Well, they've also looked at it below, but I'm going to stick to vertebrates here. So mammals, birds, fish, reptiles. Same system. Exactly the same nerves, exactly the same conduction, exactly the same neurochemicals. They feel pain. Okay, so there's no physiological reason to ever think that they're not feeling the pain. They are. They may not show it differently. They may not cry. They may not yelp, but they feel it. So that's been well established. Okay, come on, there we go. Okay, I'm going to shift again just a little bit to looking at a philosophical reason and a moral argument to prevent suffering in animals. And this is Jeremy Bentham is really well known for this because, you know, in the early years, there were a lot of philosophers who said, yeah, animals are just, they operate by instinct. They don't feel anything. They're just kind of like motor vehicles with fur on them. And Jeremy Bentham said, the question is not, can they reason, nor can they talk, but can they suffer? And he continued on to say that if an animal is sentient, and this is sentience, this is the definition of sentience. Sentience is the ability to experience feelings and sensations. It may not necessarily imply higher cognitive functions such as reasoning or complex thought processes. Doesn't mean they can create a sonata, but then again, neither can I, and I can feel pain. And so if an animal is sentient, they can suffer. They will feel pain, they will suffer, okay? And science, again, has very well determined that, yes, animals are sentient beings. Let's go a step further on this, just to get you outside of your comfort zone. Okay, do animals experience emotions? How much are they similar to us in the way that they perceive kind of their environments? So do they experience, to look at this one, joy, sorrow, empathy? Do they grieve when loss of a close companion, when they experience loss of a close companion? Do they actually, do they have compassion? So do they experience that whole range of emotions that we attribute to most humans, to all humans actually? And all the science, so essentially the authors of these two books, in addition to a number of others that I didn't put up here, have looked at the scientific research, and it confirms the existence of emotions in animals similar to those in humans that, if you really watch animals for any length of time, it's kind of clear that in fact they do have these emotions. They do have preferences for particular either people in their lives or other animals in their lives. They do feel pain. They do yelp. They, and they've actually shown that a number of animals do have empathy. If they see another animal being hurt, they respond in a way that's consistent with empathy in humans. Okay, so again, nature kind of has created a really good blueprint, and she just keeps repeating that blueprint over different species because it works for survival, right? So we're not as different as we think. We just have our external features are a little different. How we communicate's a little different, but the basic makeup is the same. Okay, so moving on, let's look at using non-lethal methods to manage conflict. There's a variety of ways we can do that, and we're going to go into each of these individually. All right, so, okay, let's start with using non-lethal methods. Fences, you're all very familiar with fences. We've all seen them. You have them in our garden. If you're going to use a fence to keep animals out or in, you need to know what animal it is and how high it needs to be. Higher for deer, lower for rabbits, buried into the ground for animals that dig, like foxes that will dig under. And this was one that I learned that I thought was great. Floppy fences for animals that climb. So this is the outside of the fence. This is the inside. You've got your fence coming up here. It's supported by your poles, whatever they are. And then it comes over the top, and it's got some very flexible supports here. An animal climbs up, gets here, and says, uh-oh, and goes, and down on the ground. So it's a very creative way to keep some of those climbing animals out and not really any harder than putting up a real fence. Row covers are really great to keep insects, out of your vegetable plants, that sort of thing, and to keep birds away from berries and that sort of thing. In some cases, you can use mulches that have a high oil content or chemicals in them like cedar or pine, and those will deter certain soft-bodied insects because they're actually, it will injure them if they try and cross. Companion planting and distraction planting, if you're a master gardener or have gardened a lot, you probably know those premises. They're kind of flip sides of the same thing, but companion planting is what you want to do is you want to put two plants together. One of them is something that's not preferred by the insect or pest you're trying to deter. So something with a strong scent like mint or herbs or marigolds or something the insects don't like to eat. Okay, so you plant that around the plant you're trying to protect so that those animals don't want to cross that barrier to get to the good stuff. Distraction planting is the opposite of that, where you plant something more appealing to the animal as a trap crop or a sacrificial crop, and you plant it away from the plant that you're trying to protect to distract animals over there or insects. And in the case of insects, once those insects are on that trap crop, then you can pull it and you can just dispose of it. Okay. So that's the thing there. Companion planting and distraction planting work best if they're done together, because then you've got two methods or better than one. Other options, you can encourage natural predators like natives that attract beneficial insects that will come and then kill the insects in your garden that you don't like. You can hang shiny objects or reflective tape around fruiting plants to, try and scare birds or squirrels. It might work for a while. You may need to change those up periodically. Non-toxic repellents, just a note about that, is there's a lot of repellents, non-toxic repellents that are on the web and are, they say they're non-toxic. Do your homework. They're not all non-toxic. So do your homework, really. You have to check that out because they're trying to sell you a product. A word of caution about mothballs. They're very toxic to the environment, extremely toxic because they contain naphthalene and paradichlorobenzene. And then that gets into the soil, then that gets into the water, then that kills, goes down the whole food chain. And they're actually illegal now. But the reason I mention it is simply because I was on a listserv recently that somebody was asking, how do I repel snakes? And the number of people cropped up and said, use mothballs. Don't use mothballs. Please don't use mothballs. And don't repel your snakes because they're actually really good in your environment. Okay. Okay. What about using non-lethal methods like humane trapping or relocation? And this trap, I'm going to try not to trip here. This is what is known as a have a heart trap. If you've ever used those or heard about those, have a heart, what's not to like about that? Okay, so first off, when studies that have looked at the survival rate of animals that have been relocated, wildlife has been relocated, in squirrels, 97% are dead within the first 3 days, not 3 months, 3 days. Raccoons, 50% in the first 3 months. All right, the reason for that, well, there's a variety of reasons for that. And I'm going to ask you to indulge me for just a minute here. Okay, so you are walking down, we're going to make it Chapel Hill today instead of Hillsborough. You're walking down Chapel Hill, you're going to go into, what's a good coffee shop in Chapel Hill? I don't know. Going into Starbucks, I don't know, wherever. You're going to get a cup of coffee, you're going to get a cookie, and then you're going to go pick up your kids at school, okay? Well, because it just happens that an alien starship is above you, because why not? And that's going to beam you up because it's doing a research project on how humans survive when they're relocated. Okay, and so it's going to take you far away from here and drop you into the middle of Chicago. I hope nobody here. Well, just pretend you don't know anybody in Chicago. Pretend you've never been in Chicago, and you pretend you don't know where Chicago is. Okay. So it drops you into the middle of Chicago, and it's going to drop you into a really poor section because this is their experiment. All right, and so you are now in the middle of Chicago in a neighborhood you don't know. You have the clothes on your back. You have no phone. You can't contact anybody. You have no money. You have no charge cards. You do not know where you can find food. You don't know where you can find water. You don't know which direction is which. And the local people in that neighborhood really don't want you there. They're coming after you. They do not want you in their territory. Okay, so you got to hightail it out of there if you want to survive. Okay, and so now you can kind of see the situation that these animals are in. These animals, most animals have very defined home ranges. They know those home ranges. They know where they can go for safety, where they can escape predators. They know where food is. They know where water is. They know how to get from A to B. They usually have, many of them have very close bonds to other individuals in their home range. You know, usually their own species, sometimes even different species. Okay, and so now you've taken them and they want to get home, just like you or I would want to get home to our families and the people we know and our kids. And so they're going to leave they're going to leave where they're dropped off. They're going to try and get home, and they're going to be crossing roads, and they're going to be killed on roads, and they're going to be predated because they don't know, you know, there's a hawk or an owl, they don't know where to hide. Okay, so they're going to have high risk of predation, high risk of injury. They're stressed. They've injured themselves trying to get out of the cage. They've injured their feet. They've injured their nose, their face, and they're stressed. Their immune system's low, and so they're at risk for infection and disease. So that's why most of them die. It is not humane. It's just a slower death, but certainly it is, you know, it's really hard to be dropped somewhere you don't know and you don't have any way to get around. It creates broken families and orphans. If these animals are trapped and relocated when they have nursing young or they have a nest, those young are going to die. They're going to starve to death. And even if it's just a youngster that's relying on its parent or parents to teach it how to navigate the environment, it's not going to have that learning and they're probably not going to survive. It is actually illegal in North Carolina to relocate a large number of different species. So most of them you can't relocate anyway, legally. So there are humane alternatives. I'd say one of the most humane is patience. Most of these animals are in that area temporarily. Either they're raising young, when those young are raised and they're on their own, they're going to leave. They might leave to go find a better hibernation spot for the winter. They might go when, you know, food changes with the seasons, food availability. A lot of times they'll move on, or something else will eat them naturally. Something else naturally will eat them. You can seal entry points into attics and basements and things like that. You can install one-way doors to let animals go out but not come in. There are a number of businesses that will do this for you. If they say they're going to trap and relocate the wildlife, please say no. It's not humane, and it's just going to cause a lot of pain and suffering. You want to remove food incentives if that's what they're coming for. Non-lethal deterrents like noises, motion activator lights might help in some cases. Food incentives, and I'm thinking about this and this possum, very adorable possum, but anyway, a possum that came to my bird feeder every night right outside my bedroom window, and my dogs went berserk. And, you know, I took away the food. I took the bird feeder down in the evening, put it up in the morning. The birds weren't there in the evening anyway. They don't care. And that solved the problem. You know, you can also use cayenne pepper suet. But in this case, taking it down in the morning, putting it up at night, just, you know, possum wasn't there anymore. His food incentive was gone. So there are really creative ways to manage conflict that don't involve killing or harming a species in your garden. Okay, so actually, let's help once those wildlife are in our yard, let's provide food, water, and shelter for them, because it is hard to come by out there when you don't have a Kroger down the road. Really hard. And you don't have a MasterCard, so you can't buy it anyway. So planting natives for pollinators, insects, birds, and browsing species is really helpful in creating plant layers of different heights. Different birds like to be at different heights in the canopy or lower, same with other mammals. Leave brush piles and shelter as escape avenues for small animals and for snakes, so that, you know, when the hawk is flying overhead, they have somewhere to go. Installing birdhouses is great. There are specific ways to do this, but regardless, there have been some studies that have shown that when there are a lot of birdhouses in a particular area, the diversity of bird species increases quite dramatically, and that the survival rate of offspring of birds that would normally have open nests also increases quite substantially. So it's mostly those open nesters that tend tend to really do well in birdhouses simply because they're enclosed and protected. Put a baffle on the pole so that the squirrel or the snakes and raccoons can't crawl up them. And also clean them, weird, clean them every year to prevent spread of disease, because a lot of birds will transmit diseases between bird feeders and birdhouses, so clean them regularly. Embrace the natural look, leave your leaves. A lot of you know about that already. A lot of insect young and a lot of insects actually hibernate in the winter under leaves and in that leaf mulch, including some fireflies, which I learned recently, which we love fireflies. And stems, a lot of them hide in hollow stems and, you know, overwinter in hollow stems. So leave those. Shrink your lawn. Lawns are really pretty aesthetically, and I'm going to get into that in the next slide, but you can have smaller ones and be more ecologically, create more ecological diversity in your yard. Let's go back. One more. Oh, heavens to bid. Heavens. Technology is not my strong suit, in case you didn't realize that already. Okay, we're going back. We're going to go back to there. Okay, lawns. Lawns are really pretty. We think of them as being, you know, absolutely very aesthetically appealing. However, they are ecological deserts. They are food deserts for wildlife. They provide no sustenances. They provide no place for shelter, nothing for overwintering. They are food deserts, basically. And they also, with the mowing, they create greenhouse gases, the synthetic chemicals to keep them really thick and really green, get into the waterways, get into our ecosystems, and it goes up the food chain. So you can really create some really appealing looking landscapes using natives and shrinking your lawn to just a smaller amount for if you want to play soccer with the kids or whatever you want to do. So you can just shrink it. And you can still be really nice, but actually be very, very supportive of biodiversity and provide hiding spaces and food and all the rest of it. Okay, pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, I call these all the sides. This is just a map, and I thought it was really interesting looking at where the most of these sides are used, and it is, as you can see, pretty heavily focused on the East Coast and in Europe, of course, all around the globe, but those two areas very heavily used. And why is that a problem? Well, first off, there's not a pesticide, herbicide, fungicide out there that is specific to a single target organism. They kill broad swaths of those categories. Okay, so herbicide that is specific for broadleaf plants in your lawn will kill broadleaf invasives and broadleaf natives. So it kills both. And that's also the same with pesticides. It kills beneficial insects and it kills it kills maybe the pest species. It also disrupts the ecosystem and the balance such that it kills those beneficials that would then keep the ones you want to get rid of under control. Okay, so the natural balance is totally distorted. They also then run off into waterways, streams and waterways, and become toxic to the plants and the insects and the life in waterways. And those aquatic systems are what support life up the food chain for other mammals and for us. So they stay a lot of them stay in the environment and cause negative influences and disrupt essentially the entire food chain. So avoid those absolutely whenever possible. Okay. I know we don't often think of rodenticides when we're thinking about the herbicides, pesticides, and fungicides, but I really want to bring this up because of some experiences that I've seen and what I've seen happen. Rodenticides and glue traps, like every other side, things to kill things, are non-specific. They're not target specific. So particularly pesticides, I'm talking about rodenticides here for a minute. I had a friend who lived in the foothills of California, and she had said that their bobcat population had plummeted dramatically because of the use of pesticides, not pesticides, rodenticides. And the reason that is because when
let's say a mouse or a rat or whatever your small rodent is, eats that, it takes several days for those animals to die. So first off, there's a lot of pain and suffering that goes along with being poisoned and taking several days to die. But besides that, is these animals are weak, they're sick, they're out in the daytime, they are easy prey. But that bobcat, that fox, that coyote, that raccoon, you name it, snake, those are easy prey. So they're going to go for that, and then they become secondarily poisoned, and then they die. So those higher levels of the food chain that rely on smaller prey get poisoned and die as well. They also, cats and dogs love these things. They're very tasty. Small kids love these things. Again, they're brightly colored. They're just really a hazard for the ecosystem and for life in general. Glue traps, again, non-targeted. Anything that steps on it will get stuck on it. Snakes will get stuck on it. You can't get them off. You were telling me, Robin was telling me about a mouse and her 4 babies, and 2 adult mice and 4 babies all got stuck on the same one. They're going to die a very slow death. They're going to die from starvation and dehydration. So really a painful slow death, not target specific. So just avoid those in your environment because you don't know what you're going to kill. Okay, let's look at hidden hazards and danger zones you may not think about in your own yard. Mechanical equipment is really, really hazardous and quickly fatal to small wildlife, snakes, box turtles, small rabbits, baby rabbits that are waiting, hiding in the vegetation, waiting for their mom to come back from eating. So I do not want birds yet. Bear with me, folks, bear with me. Okay, there we go. So always look before you mow, know before you mow, and do reconnaissance before you're doing any mowing. Look at where those tall grass areas are. Walk around, make sure there's no living wildlife that are going to be killed by your mowers. If you are trimming shrubs or cutting down trees, do your reconnaissance as well. Look for birds' nests, both not only open nests, but those birds that will nest in hollow trees or in small not containers, but in small holes in the trees or very high up. Squirrels also nest in those trees as well. So avoid trimming and taking down trees during times of year when animals are nesting or hibernating. Okay, which is a good part of the year, by the way. So do your reconnaissance, look for it first. Make sure it's safe. Garden netting, I recommend never using garden netting at all. It is a death trap to small mammals, to birds. I've unfortunately gone out to my yard several years ago and found a bird skeleton, that had been trapped in my netting I had put over my berries, and I had not found that bird in time. I have seen box turtles entrapped in netting. I've seen a lot of snakes, unfortunately, entrapped in netting. They go in, but they can't back out, and they die again, very slow death. So avoid that. Why am I having issues here? Seriously. Okay. Okay, and they also, it obstructs movement. It leads to stress and injury, disrupts feeding, disrupts migration pathways. So watch the time of year, do your reconnaissance. You can mow from the outside or the inside to the outside, and small animals have a chance to move out. You can use, instead of garden netting, you can use garden hoops or cages covered with row covers that wildlife won't get entangled in. Sometimes providing a water source in your yard. Some of those animals that are going for the juicy fruits in your garden are really going for moisture, not the food so much. So that's worked for me to prevent to decrease, let's just say decrease, squirrel predation on my tomatoes. Okay, what about windows? Okay, we all have them. We all love a lot of natural light. I'm right on up there with you on that. But birds do not see glass because it reflects the environment around them. So the sky, the clouds, the vegetation, they think they are solid and they can fly right on through. But some really startling statistics is that during migration times, birds are really at risk for running into windows because they're flying and they don't see these things. But essentially, in one night in Chicago during migration, one building, one skyscraper, they looked at 1,000 birds died in one night colliding with that building. And so the estimates are that millions and millions, actually billions of birds on estimates from people who track these things, billions of birds die every year, colliding into windows and dying. The ones you see are not only the ones that die, because 60% of the ones that fly away you think are fine are going to die later due to damage to wings, to beaks, usually internal injuries from bleeding internally and causing concussions and head injury. And they're also easy prey because they fall to the ground and they're very weak. So most of those die even if you don't see them. So ways to help prevent that. You can use, there's a lot of different decals out there. If you go on the web and search for bird collision prevention decals, you will get so many options out there, different kinds to use. They need to be on the outside, not on the inside. Birds, the reflection is on the outside, birds can't see it on the inside. Has to be on the outside, has to be in a very small 2 by 2 inch pattern so that the birds aren't trying to fly in between them, right? You can use paint or soap or stencils on the outside if you want to use something cheap. Just have to reapply it. Turn off outdoor lights. This one I think is really important, not just for birds, but also for the insects and moths. The birds and insects, a lot of night flying insects navigate by the moon. When you have a bright light, they're like, oh, it's the moon, but it's not, and so they get very disoriented. And then particularly migrating birds get very weak if they get disoriented and they can't get to where they need to pretty quickly and get food. Shielding, if you must have outdoor lights, you can use some shielding to direct that light downwards so it's not quite as widespread. Birds in particular are less affected by long wavelength light bulbs, 560 nanometers or more, seem to be better and a little less distracting for birds. I'm not sure about insects on that, but best things just turn them off. If you don't need them, there's no reason to have an outdoor light on all night. You can hang wind chimes to make noise close to windows. You can attach bird feeders so they're coming to the bird feeder, not trying to go through the window. And there are bird-friendly glasses and films that are, you can just put on your entire window. Bird-friendly glass, if you're probably pretty expensive unless you're building a new house or renovating or something. Okay, roadways. Let's talk about roadways. They are major hazards to wildlife of so many varieties and so many sizes and so many levels. They fragment habitats, isolate populations. They limit the gene flow because they can't get from one part of their habitat to the other part or to the ecosystem. So they cause a bunch of little fragment of puzzle pieces that aren't joined. It changes animal behavior, causing avoidance of important habitats because they don't want to cross those busy highways. And I had to put up this Far Side cartoon over here just because I love Far Side. But it's like, yes, talking about dogs, but I kind of envision that being, deer. It's like, okay, I'm ready, I'm gonna go, and may get across that once, but next time, yeah, maybe not so much. There are some really startling statistics on the number of animals that are killed on roadways. There was, I don't even know when this was done, fairly recent study done on number of deaths one evening of vertebrate animals in the United States on roads. I want to say it was like 1 million. I think it was 1 million vertebrate animals one night on US roads. Okay, which actually translates into, if you think about all year long and migration times a year is, millions, hundreds of millions of animals, vertebrates that are killed on roads every year. So a huge loss to biodiversity, just major loss of animal life in biodiversity and gene diversity. So what can you do? You can really drive slowly at night. We don't need to go fast at night for your own safety as well. Look for the eye shine. Most nocturnal animals have that retinal, it's called a tapetum, but essentially it reflects light and you can see that eye shine if you're going slowly and if you're paying attention to avoid that. You can request speed bumps or traffic circles to slow the speed of traffic. Be an advocate in your community to advocate for wildlife bridges that go over, major roadways or tunnels that go under. I know Hillsborough has some of those. We could always use more. There are what's called smart fencing that will direct animals away from dangerous parts, but direct them to places that are safer, usually hopefully a tunnel or a overpass that they can cross over safely. Wildlife sensors that are on the side of the road will actually detect movement on the side of the road and blink a light for drivers so that they slow down because they know there's an animal on the side of the road. So those are out there. They are more costly. So you really need to advocate for those in your neighborhoods and in your communities. Okay, so let's look at what we have talked about and hopefully have meant something to us in this, or that we've, kind of changed our perspective a little bit. Share the landscape. So this world was not created just for humans. It's not all about us. There are other life forms, and they're all critically important to biodiversity on this planet and life on this planet, the way ecosystems function, even those that we don't like and we consider as pests. Use non-lethal methods for managing conflicts. Avoid the use of pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, synthetic fertilizers, and rodenticides. Throw that plug in there. Use native plants to invite and support wildlife into your yard. That's what they evolved to eat. That's what they, that's what they grew up with, or should have grown up with. And once they come to your yard, and if you plant a lot of natives and make it a very friendly place, they will come. Use native plants, ensure your gardening plants, your gardening practices, I can say that, prevent injury and provide safe havens for those wildlife once they are there. Okay. So, I think we have to protect what is in our world, even if it's just a very small world in our backyard. The last one is not to do with protecting wildlife per se, but spend time observing and developing appreciation for the complexity of the wildlife in your yard. There's a lot of studies that have been done that show that spending time in nature is really good for our mental health. It really is important for maintaining cognitive function as we age. And the more you look at and appreciate the life that goes on around you all the time, the more you will love them, the more you will want to protect them, and the better it is for biodiversity. Okay, so that is my spiel. Some acknowledgments. I want to acknowledge both Ginny Fellon and Robin Bedingfield for encouraging me to do this presentation. They're both Orange County Master Gardeners, Orange County Library System and the Hillsborough branch, and the Seymour Center for providing the space and the AV support. Janet Statz, who did a wonderful presentation on environmental gardening and knows a lot about environmental gardening, and I borrowed a little bit of this information from her presentation that she did. There are a number of useful websites that I really recommend. Humane gardening was something that was a term that was coined by Nancy Lawson. That website, humanegardener.com, is her website. It's just a wealth of information. I've also got her book back there. You can look at that if you want to. I found enviroliteracy.org to be really helpful, looking up the benefit of different species for the environment. The one I really loved and have used is beyondpesticides.org, because I always have these questions. Well, if I don't use that, well, what can I use? That sort of thing. Really great one. A number of really good native plant organizations, National Wildlife Foundation, really good website on natives, and you can search by your zip code. It's awesome. Also, that's that one. And also the NCSU Plant Finder Toolbox at this one. Orange County Extension Office. Full disclosure, I'm not a photographer. I don't take pictures. You really don't want to see my pictures that I do take. They're pretty terrible. I got all my images off of google.com. And okay. The NC State Extension has a number of publications. I've got copies in the back about inviting wildlife into your yard and those are in the back. And there's also websites. You can get that information as well. And those are the books that I used for references. The Humane Gardener, again, the person that got me going down this road to begin with, bringing Doug Tallamy across the board, fantastic. Bringing Nature Home and Nature's Best Hope are really good. Wildlife Friendly Vegetable Gardener. So all really good ones. And those are all in the back for you to take a look at if you want to. And, oh, nope, we're not going down that road. Never mind. Okay, that is it. So if you have any questions or comments, I'm happy to take those, or just have any anybody else want to say anything or have some thoughts. Yeah, go ahead.
Spoke of providing
Uh-huh.
backyard world. I have a deer who's adopted me,
Oh, how lucky you are. Yes.
hang out in my backyard, and I actually made this big trough, a workshop where you use the concrete and the perlite and everything, and made a big trough for her.
Uh-huh.
But, I wanna know, what is the best way to provide water? And should I provide deer corn? I always run up hearing about deer corn. What should I do to help?
So water is fantastic because it supports so many other organisms and types of life beyond just deer. You got to keep it clean, but otherwise it's really important. You can use bird baths. You can do a small little bubbling fountain. I think bird baths are great. You can create a small little pond in your yard. You know, if there are seasonal streams, you know, let them be seasonal, but you can plant a rain garden that might help as well to capture runoff is really a good way to do it. So it really depends on your landscape and what you're trying to achieve in the space you have and the cost. But even just bird baths are great for insects and dragonflies and birds and squirrels and those kinds of things. You just have to keep them clean. Okay. As far as deer go, they'll probably take anything they can get to, you know, so. As far as food goes, I think that's a double-edged sword, to be perfectly honest. Corn in and of itself is not good for deer. They do not have that digestive system that can really accommodate that. And over time, it changes their bacterial flora, intestinal microflora, and can make them quite sick. So avoid the deer corn. I don't actually recommend providing food because we want them to be out doing their natural browsing. That's what they're supposed to do. Be those seed dispersers, do your thing. So I don't recommend that. I have to admit, in the middle of winter, when the deer are all really skinny around my yard, I think about buying a lot of romaine lettuce and throwing it out there, but I don't. I let nature take its course. But you know, if this deer is coming to your yard and she's used to coming to you for food, it's going to have to be a slow transition away from it. So. Oh, okay. So you're just doing water. Okay. Okay. Yeah. And I've got deer coming to my, it's not a lawn because it's really weeds, but it comes to my green space and browses, you know, and that's all fine. If that helps.
Now you had a question?
Yes, Kathy, on our property, we don't use pesticides, herbicides. We don't even use many fertilizers, only in my garden beds. But my husband wanted to use mosquito dunks. And of course, they say, you were talking about how none of these are, they're all broad spectrum. None of them are just for a targeted species. And can you speak to what mosquito dunks could also be doing? Because the little packaging and the websites all say this will only kill mosquitoes. This will make a huge dent in the mosquito population, but it doesn't hurt anything else. And we kind of know that's not true. So would you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, they're gonna of course say that because they want you to buy their, but what you told me yesterday about this was that it's actually BT, so it is a quote natural organism, not a chemical. Okay, which is going to be a lot better than some sort of chemical means. Yeah, so in that sense, that's good. It's killing the larva. So the mosquito gets into the water. It's a larvicide. It will kill all larvae. So it will kill any other larva, any other bug that might happen or insect that might happen to lay its eggs in water and goes for that water source, it will kill that most likely, because larvae are kind of all larvae as well. So one thing maybe you can do with that is to put a screen over that so that smaller insects, mosquitoes being the majority, can get in there, but larger ones can't. Okay, like dragonflies can't. Yeah, and I know a lot of people don't like mosquitoes, and I know mosquitoes they can transmit disease, and I know that's fairly uncomfortable when you get, mosquito bites if you're allergic. They're great bat food and bird food. So, on the flip side, they too have a role in the ecosystem. So screen-in porches are great. Long sleeves, long pants are helpful. Mosquito repellents on you per se, citronella candles, other things like that can be useful. You might need to use them in combination.
Okay, thank you.
Not sure about this. I have a small farm and I have always had the approach I've called animal centric rather than ecocentric. So this presentation has just been wonderful for me. Thank you. But I'm curious about, and I love, I have all the critters you mentioned. I call them my neighbors. And I'm curious about the opossum because I have read that they don't carry rabies and that they eat ticks. So as a veterinarian, I thought maybe you could verify that or whatever.
Yeah. So interestingly, when it comes to rabies, animals that are marsupials are very low risk for rabies, and rodents are very low risk for rabies. So possums fall into that category. So very low rabies risk. So yes, safe on that front. As far as eating ticks, possums eat anything. They're like raccoons, anything that comes their way. And they eat a lot of insects. And so I imagine they're going to eat ticks as well as they're going to eat anything else. I don't know that for sure, but I suspect that's true.
Guineas, chickens, they'll eat ticks too.
Yes, absolutely. I had chickens once several years ago, and all the ticks disappeared. Yeah, chickens are great for that. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? Yes, you can. Yes.
Those leaves. Okay. What do I do with it when it's time to garden? Do I shred them and put them back? I mean, what?
Okay. The question is, if you couldn't hear it, leaving the leaves over the winter. Okay. What do you do with them after the winter in the spring? Okay. So, well, I tell you what I do. The leaves, I leave them for a while in the spring because there are insects and things that use that for safety, but hibernate under that. And I don't know when they come out, so I leave them. I will get them off of the driveway. I'll get them, so they're not, so I can get up and down my driveway and it looks clean. As far as leaf mulch is fantastic. It's fantastic for gardens. So if you have gardens, throw them into your garden beds. They're great to keep the moisture in soil. They decompose into that. You can shred them if that's your preference because they do break down faster. On the flip side, when you shred them, I would not shred them until the spring, okay, because you don't know what's under there. And some gardeners advocate not shredding them because there are caterpillars under there that also develop through the spring and summer. So you kind of have to make your own decision on what works best for you. So if you just pile them up in a place in your yard that you don't care about, just leave them there. Or you can spread them into areas you want to help the soil and let them just decompose naturally. Okay. Oops. Okay. We have, oh, I'm so sorry.
When you were, thanks again for this presentation. It's great. When you were talking about how to sort of maybe detract animals or insects that you're not fond of, two things come to mind from my yard. Wasps who have been nesting in our carport frequently, and also we've had a problem with rats on occasion, and burrowing and being hard to get rid of. And then some years they go away, and then other years they're pretty prolific.
So the question was about wasps and their nests and rats. I'm not a wasp expert by any stretch. There are a lot of different kinds of wasps. They build their nests. Help me out here, folks, if anybody knows more about wasps. I don't know that. What's that? Well, I'm trying to think of how long they stay in any given nest, but it probably varies by the type of wasp. I'm betting. Don't know that for sure. I mean, my own approach is I leave them be, and when it's not being used anymore, I knock it down. I don't mess with the wasps because I don't want to make them pissed off and come after me, honestly. But also, it's like, okay, you need a place to live too. So I guess the question with wasps is how much of a threat are they really to your safety, or to safety of those around you? And if you find that they really are a risk to your safety because, say, someone is really highly allergic to bee stings or wasp stings, then, at a time when they are dormant, you can knock that down. So you kind of have to judge, again, risk benefit sort of thing there. As far as rats go, it's ideal to have natural predators take out your rats. That's the ideal world, right? I suspect that, well, like most prey populations, their populations do this, so they're going to peak, then the predators are going to come in, then they got to go down, then it's going to go up, so anyway, they do this naturally. So that's natural. So the populations will probably crash again. So you can wait. If they're really a pain, and you don't have snakes in your yard, because snakes will help out with that. When I have mice in my house, because I hate them in my cabinets and in all my dishes, which is where they go, I will use snap traps. And I use snap traps. Yes, I know I'm killing a mouse, but it's very quick. It's, in my view, the most humane way of killing a rodent. And there are rat snap traps as well. So that's how I go about that. I also got a cat, and now I have many fewer mice. Different issue altogether. So I think that's, if it's really damaging things, then that would be the approach. If it's not damaging things, I was like, leave it be. That's just my perspective. That's all. Okay, I think we have run out of time. There you go.
Thank you, Kathy. That was fabulous. I think we're all going to think about the animals on our property in a new way. Please do fill out your feedback forms